Thank you again, the ICA team, for putting livestock on the map or on the front burner in this seminar series. We really appreciate the thought, because often, livestock is left out of these discussions. So we're grateful for that. Also, to the participants who registered so far, I had a look at some of the questions and issues, concerns, and so on that were raised prior to the hosting of this seminar. This is indicative of a lot of interest, a lot of concern as I look through the questions, and a lot of them, even if I don't deal with it directly in the presentation, we will have an opportunity to discuss them a little further during the breakout session afterwards. So definitely we appreciate the recognition and being able to shed some light on this aspect of livestock production as it relates to forage feeding. Can you see my presentation now?
Yes, it's up.
All right, good. Let's get this out of the way so I can see everything. All right, so just a brief on the outline of the presentation that I'm going to go through. Define some key terms as it relates to forages and forage feeding. Talk a little bit about impacts on our forage feeding systems as they exist within the region. The value of high quality forage in combating climate change impacts, not only on the livestock producing sector, but also on the wider environmental management when we talk about mitigating climate change and our climate response actions. In particular, forages do play a role in that. And talk a little bit about strategies towards building resilience in our forage feeding system. So some of the objectives that we're hoping to accomplish this morning, and I'm pretty sure we will, is to assess current factors affecting forage production, discuss some strategies towards improving forage feeding systems, and then, of course, most importantly, share some knowledge, share experiences with regards to ongoing practices, observations, and things that we're doing within our local environments or within our local sectors to help to either alleviate some of the challenges or to build resilience within our livestock feeding sector. Just some key definitions. We often talk about livestock feeding systems, and I would like to classify ours in the region as a forage-based system. Of course, for persons who understand livestock production, you would know that there are other systems that aren't necessarily forage-based, all right? So the majority of what is fed to our animals actually comes from plant resources, comes from what is otherwise referred to as grass. And I need to draw the distinction between grass and forage. You often hear the term, why, there's grass out there, or there's grass in the pasture, that kind of thing. And the term grass is used very loosely sometimes without appreciating the context that we do need to pay attention to what exactly it is that we're feeding our animals. Not anything green can count as good quality forage. All right, not any old plant or any old grass species can actually count towards valuable material that is contributing to the nutritional needs of our livestock. So we have to qualify what it is that we talk about when we mention grasses or forages or whatever. Also understand the fact that when we classify something as forage, it doesn't necessarily have to be a grass. It can be a shrub, it can be a tree, it can be other plants. So not just grasses form that forage term that we talk about. There are also forage and fodder. These two terms, or these two F words, are used interchangeably, and they basically relate or refer to the same thing. Like I said, there is a distinction between conventional feeding systems that are heavily concentrate based. And you know what I'm talking about, the bag feeding that is often always used in producing livestock. And then you have the system that is based on forage, where more than 60 to 70% of the diet is actually constituted by forages. When we talk about forage quality, again, being able to appreciate what we mean when we talk about the quality of a forage, most importantly, the contribution that it makes to satisfying nutritional needs of our animals, that is very important. We'll also be able to talk about availability, consistency of supply, and so on when we talk about forages. I would like for us to touch on aspects of pasture management or even forage management for the banks and so on, because that again is somewhat, I wouldn't call it taboo, but it's something that is not particularly stressed upon when we talk about the significance of forages. We don't talk about their management. You know, we don't talk about systems that allow us to produce forages in a sustainable manner that would allow us to continue feeding our animals consistently. And then touch a little bit on aspects of utilization and talk about conservation, all right, ways that we can preserve forages so that we can have them for continued use throughout the year, given the challenges that we face. So first of all, let us see if we can understand a little bit about quality. Now, when you say high quality forage, there has to be, again, a distinction made between any regular old forage or high quality forage. And this presentation is about high quality forage. How do we in fact determine forage quality? Now, there are some among us who have a lot of experience, and over time, you've developed the eye, so to speak, whereby you can help to identify certain characteristics in a forage bank or in a fodder bank, in a pasture and so on, that allows you to determine whether or not this forage is of good quality. Some of us look for flowering, some of us look at leaf color, some of us look at the stage of growth of the grass, so we can tell by the age to know, well, all right, yes, this may not be of good quality and so on. There is also, when you take it a little further, the ability for us to harvest and analyze these forages so that you can actually, from a chemical standpoint, determine what the macro and micronutrients are within that forage. So that again is a big aspect or a big contributor when we talk about quality, right? You see palatability and digestibility. So another important thing is not just having the forage present, but whether the animals actually eat it, how much of it they consume, and how digestible are the nutrients within that forage. Because if they're not readily digestible, then the animals still won't have access to the nutrients. So all of these are factored into the quality discussion when we talk about forages of high quality. So when we say high quality, what do we mean? We mean forages that carry a lot of the essential nutrients, the fiber, the proteins, the starches and whatnot, right? Structural carbohydrates. We also talk about palatability, forages that are highly palatable, forages that animals will readily consume and not just consume because they don't have a choice, all right? Digestibility, forages that supply nutrients upon consumption. It's not just forages that provide the animal with a full gut and then, you know, basically minimally process and they exit out the back door, but forages that animals can actually extract a lot of nutrients out of. Okay, and then of course forages that you look at the presence of anti-nutritional factors, those that are low in these anti-nutritional factors, and these are factors again, chemical compounds and other things that inhibit the digestion of these plant materials, right? And there are many of them, tannins and other compounds, toxins, and so on. So minimal amounts of these compounds will be found in high quality forages. Impacts of climate change. And we're again looking at this from the standpoint of livestock producers, all right? We rely heavily on rainfall, right, to irrigate our pastures, whether these pastures are naturally occurring, right? In these parts, like in St. Lucia, we have a lot of valleys, what we refer to as the savannah, right? And it's the same in other jurisdictions where animals are tethered year-round, right? We also have in our larger countries more established pastures, and you have pasture rotation systems and all of that. But very few of these production systems actually have irrigation, right? So a lot of it we rely on rainfall, and we know what is happening with rainfall with regards to the climate situation. We have mass variability in the amount of rainfall, the consistency of rainfall, intensity of rainfall events, droughts, floods, and all of that. All of these impact on our ability or the ability of these pastures to continue to produce food for our animals, right? Increased temperature also has impact on nutrition partitioning within plants, right? And we see that happening a lot with some of our grasses. They increase in terms of lignification at a younger stage of maturation, all right? The maturation rates of the grasses have also changed in some cases. You see grasses flowering a lot earlier than you expect them to. So there are changes taking place. The plants are responding to these changes in climatic conditions. I don't know how many of you have paid attention, but in our low-lying areas, especially coastal regions, and sometimes even inland, you would have seen over the last maybe 15 years or so, a shift in the type of vegetation. Our grasslands, they don't look the same anymore, all right? They're colonized by different species. Could it be in relation to potential sea level rise or more saltwater intrusion into our low-lying areas? Could be, all right? So we do see these changes taking place, and yes, there still is a lot of work to do to actually pinpoint which aspects of the change in climate are affecting our pastures and our other plants that we use to feed animals, but we know that there are impacts, right? With regards to our alternating wet and dry seasons, we know that we have problems with availability of forage in the dry season. We have seen some large farms having to import large quantities of either hay or silage from the US and from other jurisdictions when we do run into limitations of forage in the Caribbean. We did one assessment one time, and just through the experience of our dry season alone, we've seen potential losses in the region of about $25 million Jamaican just in 1 month from a dairy sector, for example, just because we don't have enough forage, you know. So we definitely need to pay attention to these things. One of the agendas that we'd like to push is that forage is a crop. Just like any other crop, it is susceptible to all elements of climate change, and we have to pay attention to those if we have to continue the livestock sectors that are backed by forage production. So talk a little bit now about what exactly it is that we need to focus on. There is also economic climate change. And I like to introduce this into discussion because we often focus on the physical aspects of climate, but economically, there are factors that we have no control over that continue to change while we sleep at nighttime. And one of these is, you know, currencies and inflation rates and all of that. Just at the start of this year alone, we have seen feed prices increase by as much as 20% in some countries, all right? That's already backed by the onset of the COVID pandemic. We also had an increase in feed prices then. That happened at the same time when some of us lost markets for our produce and our products from livestock. So what you're seeing is that these are things that we have very little control over, especially when we, you know, rely on, and we are so dependent on imported concentrates, imported feed ingredients, and so on. So, I mean, these price changes aren't things that we can necessarily influence, but we can influence our ability to produce our own feeds, right? We can influence our ability to produce our own feed resources and try to help mitigate against the increase in price of imported feeds. Now, talking a little bit now about the value and role of high quality forages. Did I get knocked off? Did I get knocked off?
Yes.
Yes, so share your screen again, yes.
All right, no problem. What was the last thing you heard?
You were saying, talking about the high quality forage.
Okay, let me back up one.
Economic aspect.
This one here?
No.
After this.
Right. The roles and the value. Go forward.
Nice.
Right, good.
All right, sorry about that. I don't know what happened. Anyway, so value and role of high quality forages in combating challenges with regards to the forage feeding system. And like I said before, when we focus more on forages and forage feeding, we also simultaneously, there are co-benefits associated with environmental management, economic management. So it's not just the animal production side alone. You're looking at, combating effects of livestock production. For example, livestock is considered a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions and so on. So we have to look at it from that standpoint and look at how things that we can do within the sector can also impact on these scenarios and these outcomes. So from an ecological standpoint, I'm just going to give a brief comparison of the forage feeding system on its own as a standalone system compared to the conventional system, which is the concentrate-based system. And then I'm going to do somewhat of a quasi-system. Now, please don't get me wrong, any of the feed companies and all of that. This is not an advocacy to eliminate concentrate feeds from the diet of our animals. What this is finding useful synergies that allow us to capitalize on efficient use of these materials while we incorporate our locally available feed resources. All right, this is a system that we like to promote. We like to promote more efficient utilization of the supplemental feeds while we are building the base of forage, while we are building on quality concerns, while we are building on availability concerns of our forage base. We are looking at how we can successfully marry those two types of feeds, your forage base with your commercial concentrates, in order for us to achieve more sustainable, more resilient livestock production systems. So the forage systems, obviously, when we encourage the growth of plants in any environment, we do promote a significant amount of carbon sequestration. I understand tree crops in particular, depending on the size of tree, can sequester up to maybe 20, 30 kilograms of carbon every year or every cycle. So if these trees are being harvested, then you know that you can increase the amount of carbon being sequestered. When we encourage greenery, grasslands, shrubs, and other useful plants, you're also adding environmental impacts. For example, you have a lot of our plants that are nitrogenous in terms of they convert nitrogen. The legumes do that very well. We have some non-leguminous nitrogen converters that can serve as fodder crops as well. So we have to understand and appreciate the context within which we use these plants and use them to help in mitigating against some of the climatic or the climate change events that we're trying to mitigate over. In terms of the conventional system, there is little opportunity for nutrient recycling simply because a lot of the inputs come from outside of our environment. So we don't directly affect the production of these plants. We don't directly affect the use of these plants. All we do is we just utilize the value-added products. Right? So there's very little opportunity for nutrient cycle except where we have good waste management systems. Also, with regards to feeding ruminants, for example, higher levels of greenhouse gas emissions, particularly methane, are associated with the high grain-based diets. Right? So one of the simplest ways that we can mitigate against that is increasing the amount of forage in the diet. That is one of the sure ways that we can reduce to a certain extent the amount of methane released from ruminant fermentation. So when we look at now the combined system or the synergized system, we have the potential to regulate greenhouse gas emissions. We do also have the opportunity to appropriately balance rations so that we have more effective utilization of all of the ingredients that are fit into the diet, right? And that is what is of prime importance, not wasting any ingredients when they are being digested. From an economic standpoint, you can experience as much as up to 30% cost savings in the cost of feed when you look at utilizing more forages. Now, this is not necessarily saying that you need to substitute the other available concentrates or the other available byproducts, but the cost save in terms of effective conversion, right? And that is what we're talking about, being able to utilize better those feeds that we already have to pay high prices for, right? So from the standpoint of the conventional system, we are price takers in the market. We cannot influence any at all the price of what we pay for a bag of feed tomorrow. If it goes up tomorrow by $10, that's what we have to do. Pass it on to the consumers in the long run, right? So, like I said before, we're looking at a system that allows us to more efficiently utilize the expensive feeds, other supplements, and any other nutrient supplements that are used to produce our animals. We can increase their utilization or the use efficiency by including in larger quantities good quality forage in the diets. From an animal production standpoint, of course, when you have variability in forage production and quality, you will see requisite variability in animal performance. The conventional system is a lot more consistent, simply because the concentrate feeds, there are standards for producing these feeds. These feeds are supposed to deliver a certain amount of nutrients. On the other hand, because we don't have these intense standards and these intense management controls over our forage, then it's basically what you see, what you get kind of thing. But it doesn't mean that the forages can't perform just as well. So again, in the quasi system or the synergized system, where we bring effectively together good quality forage with the concentrates and other supplements, we're talking about either partial or total mixed rations that allow us to deliver nutrients from various sources that will be efficiently utilized by our livestock. And that is the type of system that we want to promote and continue to talk about. Some other examples in terms of value. What I did some time ago was to look at some of our high protein forages that we already know about. And from a digestibility standpoint, as well as nutrient availability standpoint, look at the comparisons, how they would compare in terms of if we had to sell them as a commercial meal or commercial ration on their own. Lucina, for example, the wild tamarind, everybody knows, or river tamarind, some people call it. The leaves alone, dried leaves, can be reasonably valued at approximately $200 per ton. Now, what that means is, if we were to intensify production, go through the process of harvesting, post-harvest drying, pelletizing, and all of that, this is about the type of money that we can expect to generate from producing this forage in particular commercially, all right? Where we do have production systems, because we do produce a certain amount of hay and silage throughout the region, I can give prices based on my most recent experience in Jamaica. A bale of hay, or bales of hay rather, can be valued at just about $220 per ton. And these are produced from grasses grown locally like Pangola, a little bit of Seymour grass in here, Timothy grass in there, right? But an African star too. We're producing here out of that. But again, look at the value, approximately $220 per ton. We recently also started investigating the use of sugarcane, being able to transform some aspects of the sugar industry, since we had some downsizing and reshaping of that industry, the sugar industry, recognizing that we had raw materials available, then we started looking at sugarcane as a feed, right? A forage feed. So fresh cut sugarcane is valued at about $80 per ton, right? Like I said earlier, when situations become dire, our larger companies, the larger producers who can afford it, they have to fly in by the container load, sources of forage, silage, whatever it is. And most times we just have to pay and take what we get. Because I'm pretty sure the persons who are sending it to us, they're not sending us their best. They're sending us basically what they don't want, you know, but we don't have a choice, right? And also for our local producers who are accustomed doing roadside harvesting, cut and carry, and so on, don't ignore the cost of actually going out and cutting grass. There is a cost associated with that, right? I had the experience of meeting a gentleman who was squatting somewhere in a swamp. I won't give away his location, but he periodically would exit the swamp with bundles of guinea grass that he would sell for about $1 or $2 US every morning. And he said to me, yeah, people stop and buy the grass all the time, especially persons who live in an urban area who might have 1 or 2 goats in their backyard, 1 rabbits or whatever it is. And a little bundle of grass, he would bundle it up, tie it up with some vines and carry it to the roadside and sell. Now, that is, in my opinion, economic innovation at its best, right? So things like that, they offer economic opportunities in certain situations, and we cannot ignore the value of these resources that we have in abundance sometimes. This is just a schematic of the sugarcane feeding situation. Recognizing that we had a lot of abandoned sugarcane lands, there was a simple matter of looking at how do we convert this sugarcane into a feed product that can be marketed. So we have 2 products essentially: the fresh cut product, which would be, ground up sugarcane, the entire sugarcane plant, a very good energy supplement. And then of course we had a little bit of ensilage going on. So we did some trials, did some tests, to see how well the animals would handle the silage, and amazingly both products are doing quite well. You also have other value-added products, and these are not all of them. Some of us do a certain amount of pelletizing as well. That's another value-added product. You have hay, like we've seen in some parts, the green chop, which would be fresh cut forage. We have silage. We have other types of baling systems where we can bale forages to preserve them and whatnot. And this utilization concept is something that we can probably host another seminar on. How exactly do we utilize effectively the forages that we have at our disposal? Now, to wind down, talking a little bit about strategies, all right, and building this climate resilient forage feeding system that we talk about. And we ultimately, this schematic is something that I've adopted, but we have seen this before, right? And the cycle of building resilience through adaptation, assessing vulnerability, and the actions taken with regards to climate change, how we go about, building this whole resilience concept. And if we look at it from a livestock production standpoint, I mean, the impact on human livelihoods, everybody in the Caribbean can appreciate the fact that a large portion of our diets come from animal protein. Right? Everybody in the Caribbean can also appreciate the fact that a lot of this animal protein is imported, in some cases by as much as 70–75%. We can only produce a small amount, right? 25, in some cases 15%, as is the case for small ruminants in some parts, right? But again, it presents us with economic opportunity. Assessing the ecological impacts, like I said from before, we know what plants can do towards improving environmental conditions, especially with reference to climate change. So it ties in as well climate change action, producing more high quality forages. We are aware of the impacts that these plants can have on the soil, on the air, and of course, ultimately on our production system. So in building resilience, we'd like to find a place for our tropical forages in building resilient agriculture systems. Like I said before, we need to focus on them as crops of economic significance that can help us alleviate our climate situation. So in terms of strategy, this is something that some colleagues and myself, we have conceptualized, or we loosely refer to as NAFI, as the Jamaicans would say, NAFI, worry. The National Animal Forage Feeding Initiative. Now, this is something that can be widely adopted across jurisdictions, but it is a multi-pronged approach towards trying to find a schematic roadmap towards building a sustainable and a resilient forage-based livestock feeding system. We have a lot of animals that we would hope will be able to produce at optimal levels and all of that, but we do not have much dedicated programs and resources towards, number one, understanding the forages that we work with. I mean, we've had a lot of research done. Unfortunately, a lot of it's sitting somewhere, not really being implemented per se. We do not have much appreciation for the management of forage banks and the management of forages, whether it be in pasture, in fodder banks, and whatnot. So there is a lot of room for building capacity in that regard, but it has to be driven by, you know, some level of policy, some level of understanding that, hey, look, we are in fact paying attention to the production of our forages. We actually have standards that we can implement with regards to producing these forages. Other jurisdictions do it. The people who sell us the corn and the soil so that we can manufacture the concentrate feed, they do it. They have production standards. They have production systems that have to be abided by. So why not? We can tackle it from that standpoint and establish carefully our forage production and management standards. We can do that. We also have the capacity to install and implement standards for feeding livestock, right? Because in my opinion, it is not necessarily a very responsible practice to be managing animals that we can't necessarily afford to feed, or we can't feed them properly, right? And yet expect them to produce, right? It just doesn't make sense. So we have to enforce upon ourselves livestock feeding standards that incorporate the use of forages, what it is that we have to do to produce these forages at a standard that it can be fed to our animals so that we can produce these animal proteins that we readily consume with high quality, all right? Good standards, safe products that we can continue to feed our people, right? Of course, there is room for incentivizing the commercial production of forage. We do not have very many forage producing systems in the region. We have a few hay producers here and there. We have some people who produce some significant amounts of silage. I know Barbados do have that. In Trinidad too, some small pockets, Jamaica as well. But in terms of intensified forage producing systems that we have the capacity to export across the region and all of that, we're not there yet, you know, but we have the capacity to do it. And then of course, the most essential component of this system, research and development, right? Indigenous knowledge sharing. There are many pockets of producers all over the region who know, they have knowledge of various plants, hundreds of species of plants that are used for feeding different classes of animals. Also species of plants that are used for their nutraceutical properties. I had an experience recently of feeding rabbits, right, who appeared to have symptoms of parapneumonia, using lemongrass, less than 20 grams of lemongrass a day, and it got rid of the symptoms, right? And we have this knowledge that exists across the region, right? People know what plant to use to solve this problem. They know which plants to use for feed and whatnot, but a lot of this information is not necessarily documented. And this is something that we can start readily, all right? We can generate a regional database of plant species, their utilization, what they're used for, how they're used, quantities, and so on. And also it would help us in identifying these resources within our immediate environment. And I'll talk a little bit later about immediate strategies that we can employ. But in essence, this concept, right, the forage feeding initiative, will bring together the necessary arms of administration, production, private sector interests, and of course the producer groups to put in place systems that can allow us to produce the forages, establish markets for those forages, and I'm pretty sure that producers of livestock would be comforted by the fact that there are additional sources of feed that they themselves don't necessarily have to go and worry about producing and managing and all of that. The same convenience that we enjoy from having the concentrates, that we can easily buy a bag of concentrate. It's the same convenience that we can enjoy from buying 10 bales of hay or 10 bags of silage. You understand? So we would like to see that shift taking place where the opportunities or the options for procuring feed, these options are widened to give farmers more access to materials that we can generate ourselves. So some immediate strategies for adoption that I believe are things that we can overnight influence. Identify forage resources within our immediate environment that can be used with regards to producing the livestock. Of course, we then need to identify where we can encourage these plant species to thrive. We also have the natural ability of some ecosystems to emerge into silvopastoral type systems. And when I say silvopasture, I mean trees combined with grasses and so on. And we see some of these systems emerging naturally. All right. We have tried in projects to install these trees, and we don't know, with varying levels of success. But I believe that where these systems emerge out of the natural ecosystem, these are even more resilient because the plants grew on their own. All right. And then, of course, we'll encourage plants to grow in an integrated manner, in a mixed cropping type fashion, where you have the output from one plant system, for example, your nitrogen fixers, being able to impact on your grasses who are nitrogen consumers. All right. These types of systems that, you know, synergize the various characteristics of the individual plants themselves so they can benefit the production of each other. Like I said before, there is potential or there is scope for us to develop an electronic database, right, of tropical forages that are currently being utilized, how they are being utilized and whatnot. This information can be readily shared. I belong to a couple of WhatsApp groups of farmers, and there are chats and messages going around every day with pictures and so on, showing different practices, showing different things that are being done, right? And this is readily available information, right? It can also help with the identification of species that can be used, because a lot of the times we do have the plants in our environment, but we just are not aware that they have the potential to be used as forage and what quality attributes they bring. We have the opportunity to expand opportunities to conserve forage via different mechanisms, ensiling, drying, baling, pelletizing, like I mentioned before. Also looking at how we incorporate forages into our existing feeding systems. All right. Some people at the local level are pretty much using forages for almost any class or any species of livestock, right? Pigs, ducks, chickens. There are utilizations for forages in almost any class of livestock production that you can think of. So we do have the opportunity to build that database, share that knowledge, get that information across the place. And more importantly, the research that has already been done, seek to apply, you know, the aspects of those research that are appropriate, the aspects of the developed technology, whatever has been investigated. We have situations in Jamaica, for example, fertilizer company has focused specifically on developing product lines of fertilizer specific to forages. All right, understanding the nature of forages, how they feed different species of grass, and you produce fertilizer lines for forage. This is all possible, you know. So these are opportunities that we can capitalize on and expand, you know, our opportunities to commercially produce forage. Right, and like I said before, this is something that we have to look at as an economic opportunity, commercial production of forages. So, in closing, I would just like to say that our aspirations as nations, especially considering our sustainable developmental goals and all of those things, food security aspirations and all that, these have to be tied to our aspirations for agricultural production. As is this case, this is the case of livestock. So definitely we can appreciate the fact that food security is definitely tied to animal feed security. That is why I mentioned the fact that we need to concentrate national efforts towards producing these forages and making them available as an option for purchase. All right. So that way a producer can just pay attention to feeding these animals, growing these animals, getting performance out of them, and not necessarily have to think of where I'm going to get that type of feed from, where I'm going to get this type of feed from. So you make forage feeds just as available and just as accessible as the commercial concentrates.
We have Marcia Lord with her hands up. Marcia.
Good morning, Marcia Lord. I'm Grenada. Just I've listened to Mr. Dean, and in his presentation he has mentioned where lemongrass has used as a forage to prevent pneumonia in small ruminant. I will just like him to explain a little bit more which one of the small ruminant he's speaking about, and how effective this lemongrass was, this forage, how it was being used and tested in which one of the small ruminant. It sounds very interesting to me. Lemongrass. Thank you.
All right, Marcia, thank you for your question. I was given an example within the wider context of the mere fact that we have a lot of herbs and all different kinds of plants, all different kinds of bushes, leaves, and this and that. And some of them have nutraceutical, pharmaceutical, they have different types of properties. And I use the example of the lemongrass because it is one of my most recent experiences. And the animal that I used it with was rabbits. We noticed that the rabbits had a significant amount of congestion. They were coughing, and it's a hutch that has about 30 odd animals. And this was obviously not done under supreme scientific conditions. However, what we did was, after knowledge of lemongrass or fever grass being used in humans to help with alleviating similar types of condition, symptoms, coughing and whatnot. Then what we did was to just harvest some of the lemongrass, not give the rabbits too much. Like I said, we gave them about 20 grams each, and it alleviated the symptoms after 2 days. They stopped coughing, the nasal discharge cleared up, and that is without using any type of antibiotic or anything like that. So that was just an example that I was giving, but it's to point us in the direction of the wider understanding of how we utilize what we have at our disposal. We have a lot of forages that we can use to do many different things.
So, Mr. Avril,
Thank
just a
you very
question
much.
here. Sorry. Oh, I didn't have my hand up. Oh, I was just asking if there is only rabbits you did that experiment with, or that little trial, not an experiment, but more of a trial.
Yes, it was a trial. Yes, only rabbits.
Dean?
Yes, go ahead.
I also want to share on something. Also, our tree forages such as moringa, they have a lot of health benefits because I've been using that with the rabbits and the goats. And the goats do pretty well health-wise and stuff like that. They are antioxidants, they be antibiotical properties and stuff like that. Just to name one of them. Hello?
Yeah, we hear you.
You hear me?
Yeah, man.
As you came on that point, I just say, let me interject and see something.
Thank you very much, Kerry, for that addition. I see Nicole has a hand up. Nicole, could you go ahead?
Yes, good morning to everyone. And Mr. Avril, in his presentation, he would have mentioned the importance of having good forage quality for our livestock or ruminants on a whole. what I would say is that one has to place a lot of emphasis on the harvest frequency or the harvest interval of our forages to ensure that we have good quality for our ruminants. And this, by improving the quality of our forage, we will see a decrease in the lignin value, and this will help to improve on the intake, forage intake, the passage rates, and the overall digestion of our forages, and ultimately we're going to see an improvement in the performance of our ruminants. So this is something that I think we need to place a lot of emphasis on. That is the harvest frequency or intervals of our forages. I would say in St. Vincent, we have a lot of our agro-industrial byproducts that are underutilized. And I think we need to encourage our farmers to incorporate these forages, these agro-industrial byproducts in the ration of their ruminants. And this ultimately is going to improve on their performances in terms of milk yield, in terms of meat production. And I would say one of the challenges that we face, for example, we look at here, we have the cocoa company. We are producing chocolate, and you have a lot of the cocoa bean shell that is being wasted. And also you have like the cassava peel and so on. But one of the challenges that we face is the anti-nutrients that are present. For example, the cocoa, you have the theobromine, and the cassava, the cyanide, and so on. With the cassava, through fermentation and heating, we can reduce the cyanide to a level that is safe for our ruminants. However, with the theobromine, for the de-theobromination, it's a challenge. I don't know if anyone has any experience working with the cocoa byproducts, let's say the husk, the shell, the bean shell. I don't know if anyone out there has experience that they would like to share in relation.
Thank you
Hello?
for that contribution, Nico. Definitely, we would ask persons if they do have that experience to share it with us in the chat, and also perhaps to link with you so that you could get that information. Very important points and very important sharing there, Nico. Any other person here before we go out in the breakout groups? Or if we get that kind of momentum with the questions and comments, definitely we would want to continue a bit before we go to the breakout groups. But if not, we would go straight into the breakout groups so that we could share and conclude the session. Any other comments? Open the mic, show of hands. Okay, on my side, I'm not seeing any more hands raised or any mics being opened.
I'm not seeing anything either.
All right, then Nick, then could you take us to the breakout groups, please, Nikia?
Okay, so for the breakout group, we have Mr. Avril's team. I have actually merged some groups, some countries have only 1 or 2 persons, so you will see you will be joined with another country. So what will happen is we have these 2 questions that you will have dialogue on and answer. I will put in let me just put in the link to the Google form in the chat. So one person will be assigned, the group will assign 1 person to fill out the form. And once completed, you submit. You don't have to submit immediately. You could always wait and submit after. And the team member with Mr. Avril. Mr. Avril will give you some background on the experiences on the topic at hand. So this is what the breakout group will be in terms of dialoguing. So I will send everyone into the breakout groups now.
Thank you.
So the breakout rooms will be about 20-25 minutes. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. I do hope the discussions were engaging and we got a lot of information there. So right now, I would like that any of the group volunteer to give just a quick summary of what they discussed on the 2 questions and what, for those who would have had one of the team members from Mr. Avril, some of the discussions there. Thank you.
Okay, perhaps I could go first here.
Okay.
If I'm allowed to share the screen. Colleagues, the idea here is that we realize that some of the barriers and will be, and perhaps even some of the actions may be very similar. And so if for example, as I'm going to present, if these things are already said in other groups there, then we do not need to actually repeat them. We are going to look for more differential contributions, things that are different from what is there to add value to the discussion, whether rather than repeat it. So in my group, there's predominantly the Jamaican persons from Jamaica, and they identified some of the barriers. One of the barriers that came up very early is the barrier of predial larceny or theft, as we common persons refer to it as. One of the participants also mentioned that there are market opportunities. Largely, the market is underserved in Jamaica as it relates to small ruminants, goat, etc. And they also emphasize the need for, in terms of a barrier, that there's a barrier where people are not aware of the real business opportunities that exist to actually get into that particular production or industry or sector. And they felt also the access and dissemination of information as it relates to that was a barrier, in addition to the access to lands. The participants also took note of the lack of the proper record keeping system, particularly for herd development and also production and productivity assessments of performance. And there was also contributions on the production barriers, where it was highlighted that there's insufficient private sector interest, involvement, and investment, and also a high input cost as it relates not only to medication, but also the feed. And the last comment we got on the barriers is one of the issues of the hygienic slaughtering facilities in terms of the standard. We were not able to get as many of the actions as we did for the barriers. I'm hoping that perhaps we could get from the other groups there, but one of the things that were mentioned was there's a need for a comprehensive small ruminant policy. There's also a need to generally increase the production of meat by placing more emphasis on ruminant nutrition as it relates to forage and fodder production. So that is what we got from our group. Largely consisted of the Jamaican. There were, I think, one at this Trinidadian that I noticed here, but I think some of these things may be relevant to the other countries. Thank you very much. Group members, if there's anything that I missed, feel free to jump in there. Thanks.
Maybe I can go next myself. Thank you for that, Cheney. I think what you said, much of what my group overlooked a little bit, but we focused mostly, well, the group focused mostly on foraging. My group was within Guyana and Suriname, which they spoke quite much on the disparity between large and small scale farmers with regards to access to good quality forage materials and feed. This would also include pricing. This would also include the type of materials and the cost to getting those materials, whether it be grown here or even imported. They go further to speak on the high dependency of natural grasslands for foraging and the utilization of only one species of grass type. this was predominant because of the type of quality and animals that they would be receiving within the two countries altogether. With regards to the actions to eliminate or to address these barriers, they spoke on government intervention, particularly research-based with regards to foraging materials that can be utilized within the countries, since majority of what is being done is grass-fed. And they also spoke on the preparation of silage, since that is not a practice, particularly here in Guyana and Suriname. You might have a few farmers, but that's generally what it is. Strictly natural fed in the grasslands.
Thanks for that, for your team. Forrest, any other group would like to present anything that they would have had different from the two groups that went before?
Yeah, morning, Natalia, Damien.
Good morning, Damien.
Trust everyone is good. Yeah, well, my group, we had quite a few participants from Antigua, and we also had representation from Dominica and Bahamas. And what I found different, in fact, specifically coming out from Antigua, was the whole issue of drought as being one of the limiting factors preventing people from getting into livestock production. Because, of course, if you don't have forage or land and water to support the production of such, then this, of course, would be a tremendous barrier. The other thing that we found, I mean, we spoke about, or mention was made of theft, but we found animal predation was also a barrier for people getting involved. Lack of knowledge in terms of the actual skills in livestock husbandry was one of the barriers mentioned in the Bahamas. And of course, the cost of substitutes, the cost of low-cost substitutes of the meat that is being imported would also be an impact that would prevent people from taking business opportunities. So just wanted to add that. Similar to what Cheney had mentioned, we didn't go too far into the strategies to address some of these barriers, but we spoke about policy directives, training in how to convert the forage into convenient feed at the farm level, and of course funding, and creative ways in which we can perhaps pool resources together as in cooperatives and look at things like cryptocurrencies and ways to create funding or create capital to support the initiatives.
Thanks very much, Damien. Anybody else wants to go ahead and add anything? Yes, Nicole, I could see your hand.
Yes, yes. I am reporting for St. Vincent, and we would have touched on several barriers. Well, the other groups who would have presented would have mentioned quite a few of those barriers. But I would add that we look at as a barrier the increase in the incorporation of indigenous feeds in the ration of ruminants, because we know that commercial feed is not a lot of farmers out there can afford to purchase or incorporate commercial feeds in the ration of their ruminants. So if they place more emphasis on utilizing what is being produced or what we have in the country, that will help to reduce the production cost. Also, many of the farmers, they are landless. So a lot of farmers out there, they want to improve on, probably increase the acreage of their pastures or incorporate new species of forages that can improve on the overall performance of their ruminants, but due to their landless state, they are unable to do so. So one of the solutions that we look at is the formation of cooperative in which these farmers, they can join together and lease, there's a possibility that they can lease lands as a group, and this can help to improve on that problem or that barrier. Also, we would have to touch on predial larceny. That seems to be a deterrent for a lot of young farmers because investing a lot into farming and at the end of the day not being able to harvest what he would have invested is it's a deterrent for many of those farmers, young farmers. Oh.
Okay, thank you for that addition there, Nicole. Go ahead, Dean.
Just a couple things to add. We did mention a lot that has been mentioned already. One of the things that came out in my group as a barrier is the lack of knowledge or understanding between things that happen within the production cycle or the production of animals and how it is connected to the products that come out of the livestock production system. So we have the example of apiculture, for example, where certain farmers would utilize certain plants in order to develop a flavor profile for honey, and how certain plants would help affect the flavor profile of honey. That I found was particularly interesting. So the solution, of course, to that would have been utilizing some type of capacity building educational platforms to help people understand better how you use forages or how you use plants within the production system to help impact on the value added component of livestock. We talked about the same type of process and alignment with national initiatives and governmental strategies, obviously, how these would help to guide, the types of production systems that we do, how we do certain things within production. So there was that addition that we had to make.
Thank you for that input there. Then if we could get one more, if one more group would like to say anything additional there. If not, then we will move now into the closing remarks from Ainsworth Riley of Jamaica, Eco Technician. Ainsworth.
Thank you very much, Nikila. Colleagues, I think this was, I hope everybody's hearing me. So I think the session has been a very informative and quite useful. Many of us are, based on the feedback, many of us are probably, involved in this production of small ruminants. So we're already, engaged in the system. So some of the things that Mr. Avril would have pointed out, some of us may be familiar with some of those, with some of the information, as well as we would have been beneficiaries of the additional information that he would have provided. So I want to say special thanks to Mr. Avril. He and I go back, in some other life. We have worked together on a number of projects, and so I'm quite familiar with him. So I want to say thanks to you, Mr. Avril, for presenting to us, for sharing with us this information, small ruminant production. You paid special emphasis on the impact of climate change on forage dependent feeding systems, the value and role of high quality forage in combating challenges with forage feeding, and of course, strategies towards building climate resilience forage feeding systems through increased utilization of local forages. One of the learning experiences that I have gathered in working with the small ruminants over the years is that when there's need to be a mindset change as it relates to climate change, that we need to at least maybe adopt the principles of countries in the northern hemisphere, the far northern hemisphere, where they have a winter period where they have to they have to ensure that they grow during the springtime and harvest. And of course, they are able to feed the animals through winter. And for us, it's the opposite, right? We need to ensure that, you know, we grow when we have a lot of rain. Seeing that most of our systems are based on rain-fed system. So we need to ensure that we grow during the rainy season. And of course, we develop the systems to reap and to harvest, right? That is very critical. So I thank you very much for the information you have provided, Mr. Avril. Just give me a second here, my system went down. Let me also thank the coordinators of the program. Special thanks to Nikilia and our technical colleagues for coordinating and for planning the sessions. And of course, Nikilia for touching bases with us from time to time to ensure that we are kept abreast of the schedule. Thank you very much. Thanks to the team. And of course, we couldn't have had a successful session with you, all the participants, right? I am quite impressed when I look at the numbers. Actually, when I came in late because I had another session. I thought I was seeing something like 90 something. And then because I got bumped off, the numbers went down to 73. But even at the end of a session, to have 73 participants, you know, that is highly commendable. So participants, I want to thank you for your participation. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for the questions. And of course, thank you for the information that you have provided out of your own personal country experiences. And I hope that you will continue. I think we have one more session we have. Nikita, remind me, one more session we have?
Yes, we have one final session. I will give a few more information on that after you
Right,
complete.
so
Yeah.
I'm hoping that the participants here will also make themselves available for the next upcoming session. So again, everybody, thank you very much for participating. And I wish you Godspeed, and remember, please to keep safe, wear your mask, wash your hands, and those who haven't yet been vaccinated, please get vaccinated. Thank you.
One question, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
Can I ask a question here?
Yes, go ahead.
Hello?
Hello?
Will
you hear me?
Will the participant get a participating certificate?
Yeah, I was just about to comment on that as the last house thing here. Colleagues, I want to also thank you for being part of that. Those of you that have been on all the three forums. From the beginning, we did present the information that persons who would have attended three or four of the forums would be receiving a certificate that is based upon the theme of the entire webinar. So that is being done. In addition, we also mentioned that there is also the last session that we are going to have. We are going to be sharing the experiences of interventions in the countries. There are several interventions by the way of projects. And we are also hoping to select persons. We will speak a little bit more about that. Nicola will be sending you a note about that in terms of actually providing some value for persons that would have attended by way of an in-kind contribution for purchasing certain elements or to help start off or improve your production system, whether on an institutional or individual basis. So these are the two things that we said from the beginning of the seminar, which we are the points of differentiation. Yes, you're going to, once you have met these criteria, you are going to be awarded a certificate if you attend 3 or more of the sessions. And if you have attended all 4 sessions, it would qualify you to participate in a process that we have in selecting candidates or persons from at least 1 or 2 persons from each country to award them an in-kind contribution for the purchase of, let's say, tools and very small equipment. They're not a vast amount of persons. I'm being very clear here, so that they could at least start to implement what they have learned. That is what ICA is known for, trying to translate the knowledge into action on the ground. So we are committed to try and design our system and our initiatives to allow that to happen. So thank you very much. I'm hoping that cleared things up. Thanks.
Okay, we have any other questions that we would like address before we close? Okay, so if not, so our final forum is scheduled for November 10th. And as Chinny mentioned, we will look at some of the work that ICA has been doing across the region in terms of enhancing climate responsive agriculture in the Caribbean. So we gave you the free forums touched on the forage, the soil, the water, the climate. And then, so now we want to give you an idea of the results that we are getting, the impact that these projects have been having. And we also look forward to even building further on these forums, as we are not able to touch on everything on all the topics. So we will have, hopefully in the coming year, we will have local or even more regional again sessions for you, the participants. So if we don't have any more questions or any more comments, we'll close off. And I want to say again, thank you so much for joining. And I wish everyone a very lovely day.
Thank you very much, Nicolia. And we do invite you to the next session to also share with us projects that you have been involved in. So we very much look forward to hear about these projects there so that we could make sense of all of them and identify the gaps or collaborative opportunities. So come ready with your projects, even those you are suggesting and you would have been involved in. Thank you and have a great day. Bye-bye.
All right, have a great day, everybody.